Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. The first in a few weeks. It feels like obviously went on holiday, made that long video, enjoyed myself, saw Chelsea in Orlando, although that was probably the worst part of the holiday, to be honest, and very much a reality check before I arrived back in the UK. And so much has happened obviously with Chelsea. In some ways it hasn't. In some ways things have felt quite familiar in recent weeks. But the season is upon us, isn't it? Pre-season has kind of concluded now with the two Udinese games, and back to making videos, season predictions. I think I'll do a Q&A before the Everton game, and then of course the preview for the Everton game. And just, we're back into it, aren't we? And it's going to be so intense. There's so many games for Chelsea, even before the September international break, and then the World Cup, and it's a lot of stuff to get into. And it's interesting with today's video. Make sure, guys, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Thank you. I said this before I went on holiday, but thank you once again for the support on my new Substack. I think 3 or 4 pieces out there. I'm trying to do it once a week on a Sunday. The latest one is on Kai Havertz. It's kind of all about why I think this season is so big for him and why I think he needs to perform. But the new subscribers, go over there now. It's free to subscribe. As I say, weekly at the moment, a new piece goes out there. It's mainly about Chelsea, but I think I will probably expand into more Premier League football stuff as the season really gets going. But in this video, I think I just kind of want to cover some of the stuff that's been going on recently, but also the big news of today: Cucurella, Fofana, Chelsea's transfer kind of strategy. What is it? I think it's quite confusing at the moment. But just quickly on pre-season, that game in Orlando, it was a real harsh reality check personally, sitting there and watching Michy Batshuayi come on and watch Malang Sarr and Marcos Alonso struggle with Bukayo Saka. I mean, kind of harsh flashbacks to the back end of last season, to be honest. You know, I didn't have to fly halfway across the world to watch that because I could do it pretty locally in London. But it was so hard to watch that game. I'd kind of got a heads up over what the mood was like in the Chelsea camp before the game, and that lowered my expectation. And of course, it is just amazing to have it checked off that you've seen Chelsea play in America, and kind of the energy and the amount of people in that stadium. And you know, you kind of realise, as someone who has been so lucky to watch my local club Chelsea for so long at Stamford Bridge, it can feel quite mundane going to watch Chelsea play football. But you understand the excitement in America, and it was quite cool to be there. But the game itself was obviously very concerning, and just the feeling that I think Tuchel himself, his downbeat mood, the lack of coherent plan within the players, how different in terms of fitness levels and intensity and kind of cohesiveness Chelsea and Arsenal looked that night. But then, you know, you do go into the Udinese game, and there's a lot more optimism after that, because you do see encouraging signs, and you see a lot more players that look like they're going to be here this season being used, rather than ones that kind of have no future. There still is a blend of a lot of things from the past that I think are still here and need to be resolved. And I think it was always going to be an uphill battle for Bowley and for Tuchel to resolve that in one summer, as I think we're seeing, particularly on the outgoings front. But I'll move on now to the incomings, because I have to say, you know, so I left on that Sunday, and I think on the Saturday I mentioned Jules Koundé. And of course, as I was away, Chelsea were on the brink of signing him, and then the deal collapsed, and then he goes to Barcelona. So kind of a sequel to the Rafinha saga, and kind of all confusing really that Chelsea couldn't get that deal done. For me, I felt that Koundé would have been a very good signing. I think he would have been a very adequate player to bring in the back three, and it just kind of increases the pressure, doesn't it, in the remaining weeks of this window for Chelsea to sign new players. And we'll get into Fofana, because I think that's a pretty simple one for me in terms of what Chelsea have to do in that deal. I don't think it's that complex. I think Leicester will ask for a high price, and then Chelsea just kind of have to cough it up. But let's start with Cucurella. So today the news broke, and I think this is kind of linked to that story in The Athletic last night, because we had murmurings, and then we had this story from The Athletic that again does mention Fofana, but also mentioned Denzel Dumfries from Inter Milan, the right wing back. And then under 24 hours, we get that Chelsea are in talks with Brighton for Marc Cucurella, a left wing back. And it is a little bit frantic and confusing to kind of understand what Chelsea's business kind of and transfer strategy is this summer. It's not the sense that you're going from one wing back target for another, and I have been told, and it kind of seems that it would be Cucurella but not Dumfries. That may change, but it kind of feels like it's only going to be one wing back rather than both of them coming in, which I think is a better deal for Chelsea. And out of the two, I think Cucurella is a better option for Chelsea. But you can't help but feel there is a little bit of chaos compared to those early weeks in the window, in terms of we're going from one centre-back target to the next. Of course, we haven't been able to get deals done, but the way we sort of ditched Jules Koundé, put him to the side, went for De Ligt, that didn't happen, went for Ake, that didn't happen, Koulibaly did happen, but then you go back to Koundé, and then you still can't get that deal over the line, or at least you hesitate a little bit. I mean, it kind of is conflicting between the Sevilla side with Monchi saying one thing, and I'm sure Chelsea may be thinking another. And maybe at the end of the day, it came down to Tuchel's doubts over the player, which I slightly disagree with. But then you're left with, what do you do next? And particularly wing back with Ian Maatsen leaving, Chelsea need adequate cover. We really struggled in that area last season, and I'm not at all comfortable with the cover that's currently there, whether Cesar Azpilicueta does stay, whether Marcos Alonso does stay, Emerson. I think it's such a key thing at the wing back that we have players that can fill in for Reece James and Ben Chilwell and can do it to a decent level. Obviously, Cucurella for 50 million is only going to really benefit one side of the pitch, which is maybe a little bit of a frustration for Thomas Tuchel. But Cucurella, I think, ticks a lot of boxes, and I think he really did impress last season at Brighton. I think he would add that energy, absolutely. And we've seen the reporting today from the likes of, I think, David Ornstein. We've seen Nazar Kinsella, Matt Law, all reporting about this. My colleague at Football London, Bobby Vincent, how Cucurella is very much open to the move. And Chelsea are looking to sort of hijack Man City's deal, which looked like it was going to happen, but maybe they've stepped away. They may come back. I mean, in terms of an enticing offer, if that is kind of the concern for Chelsea, if Man City do return, I think they potentially offer a better path for Cucurella. I think Zinchenko's left, hasn't he, this season, and it's quite clear that Pep, I think, would want the player. And maybe actually could offer him more minutes at the Champions than with Chelsea, because Ben Chilwell, if he gets back to fitness and form, could very much become first choice again, and you expect that. I know there's been some talk about Cucurella, and I think he played left centre back against Chelsea in that game at Stamford Bridge last season. He can play that role, but I don't think that would be the reason to buy him, and that would not be a reason or kind of a general place I'd want to see Cucurella play, because I don't think that's where he's threatening at all. You want him bombing down that flank, you want him getting close to the box, you want him adding the energy and mobility, kind of directness that I think that he would obviously offer. And I think that's why Chelsea would be trying to buy him, to kind of have someone who can compete with Ben Chilwell, and then when Chilwell needs to maybe take a break, or we don't know how he's going to adapt and kind of recover properly from the ACL injury, and he has kind of looked a little bit sluggish like Reece James in pre-season, so we don't know how that's going to go. So to have someone who's Premier League ready as well, as we've seen with Raheem Sterling, can be a real benefit to the squad. I just find it, with the price and with the future of Ian Maatsen, and just, as I say, just going from target to target to target, you can kind of feel like you're getting whiplash in terms of what is Chelsea's plan. But that doesn't mean that the player, I think I'd be happy to see Cucurella arrive, because he is kind of a target for me that I think would absolutely improve the squad, and I think would definitely improve that side of the pitch, and would give me a lot of confidence that we'd have very good depth on the left side of the defence, and kind of what Tuchel could do with Cucurella, potentially even in a more advanced position if he wants to play a 4-4-2. I think Nazar Kinsella brought up the idea that Cucurella could play as kind of a left midfielder, and Ben Chilwell could play as a left back. So you could see some interesting things across the season if, and we have to stress if, because Rafinha looked like it was close, Koundé looked like it was close for very long, and then Barcelona swooped in, but we don't know if Man City or Barcelona are going to swoop in this situation, so we'll wait to see on that one. Wesley Fofana, it feels, and I'll put up some tweets now from Ben Jacobs, who was kind of describing the situation today over the valuation being about 20 million apart. Chelsea prepared to go up. Further talks this week. PSG have also inquired. Chelsea apparently have had kind of long-term interest in Fofana. They looked at him in January and last summer. Jacobs also said that also when Fofana signed that new deal, he was told Leicester would listen to fair offers in 2023. Leicester prefer to consider a sale next summer. Chelsea, hoping Fofana's openness to a move may see Leicester soften a little on the price. Not impossible, but a very challenging negotiation. So Malang Sarr, there's the possibility of him leaving, obviously, which I think when we've got clubs coming forward with offers for Sarr, I think you've got to bite their hand off. I really do. Particularly, we know the ceiling of Malang Sarr. I think at this point at Chelsea, you've got to take a profit, so that obviously opens things up. Levi Colwill, I'm not really going to talk about him today. I kind of spent a lot of time talking about Levi Colwill a few weeks ago and kind of that whole situation. I don't really want to repeat myself on that. I think a lot of you know my views on potentially selling him. But in the case of Wesley Fofana, it kind of is pretty simple to me, particularly at this stage of the window. Either Chelsea are going to cough up the money and it's going to be a big fee to sign him this summer, or we move on to someone else, because we don't have the time anymore to waste weeks and weeks and weeks trying to get this deal done. Unless Chelsea have a real confidence that if they do drag it out, I don't think player swaps is commendable to try and do with players we need to get off the books, but it's so rare in European football, and it's just not a deal that makes, I think, a lot of sense for Leicester financially. You know, they have sold big on a number of players. It's kind of been their regular thing, and they themselves are in a bit of trouble because, you know, they haven't signed a lot of players. They haven't signed anyone this summer. I think they're the only club in Europe's top 5 leagues to not make a signing. And it's a little bit weird considering sort of that feeling that they were constantly going in a good direction with Brendan Rodgers, and to lose Fofana so close to the season starting would be a massive blow. So they need to be compensated by that, and I think that for probably both parties, it's good that this deal, if it is going to happen, gets wrapped up pretty quickly, because Leicester, of course, get the money. They can reinvest that money in the squad potentially before the window closes, and Chelsea would obviously get the defender they want. And I think Fofana, listen, I wouldn't call myself an expert on him, despite him being a Premier League defender. I know people who are very high on Fofana and think he is going to turn out to be an amazing defender in Europe. And listen, you see the trajectory, you see some of his performances against Chelsea in the FA Cup final. When you do watch him, some of those attributes he has, I think the speed he has, very quick across the ground, and I think to kind of cover up for others. And you think in the current defence with, say, a Thiago Silva, Koulibaly, if you add a Fofana on the right side, how he could very much match and kind of cover in areas. And I did say in the case of Koundé, I think it's very important, particularly on the right side of the defence, Chelsea have speed to kind of cover if you want to really get Reece up the pitch, and maybe those two, as I say, can interchange at times with the idea of Reece potentially playing a little bit deeper, which I'm not a big fan of. But Premier League proven again. I think the justification for spending 70 to 80 million is that you're hoping, a bit like with Kai Havertz, this is very much a long-term investment. It's a balance between Chelsea at this point in the window need to act, and also you're looking at the player and saying, is this player in 4 to 5 years time, maybe even a little bit less than that, 80 million will look like a good deal in the end. It won't, you know, but of course there is that concern when you're splashing that much on a defender, which would blow out the water in terms of our sort of record for signing centre-backs. I think Koulibaly just about did it, but this would really, for a record, you know, for a defender, it may even be the world record for a defender. You know, Harry Maguire, obviously, from Leicester to Man United a few years ago, did that, and look at all the pressure on him. But I think Fofana, listen, I think he's got good attributes from what I've seen of him, and I feel that with the position we're in right now, you need centre-backs, and you need good ones that advance, I think, what Tuchel wants to do. And listen, Chelsea are not in a great negotiating position in this particular deal. They just aren't. And again, I'll go back to the thing, if Leicester are not willing to sell, if Chelsea are not willing to go up to a certain number that's going to make the deal happen, we cannot wait, because we've wasted a lot of weeks on deals that did not materialise. And I think a lot of us are kind of concerned that we're going to get to deadline day and still nothing's going to be done. And then you're probably in a position where Chelsea might panic and start signing players that really don't improve our squad. And those are positions that we dread, because those are the mistakes we've made in recent windows that you really want to start getting away from. So Fofana for 80 million is a little bit like eyes wide, and you're kind of like, that is a massive deal. But you know, I think it does make some sense in terms of the quality of the player, and you're kind of hoping that value will be seen in the coming years, and particularly for a player who is already Premier League proven, who's recovered well from a really bad injury that kept him out most of last season, and as I say, it strengthens the squad, and I think strengthens the options for Thomas Tuchel. So let me know your thoughts on everything. I'll probably be doing a Q&A. I'll probably be doing a predictions type video before Saturday, and obviously covering the news as it develops, because it does feel like this week particularly Chelsea are really back into action, which is good, covering it on the channel. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.